And we, of course, love it when you get interactive. The WhatsApp number to send your messages to is 0809 4440981. You can also tweet a Smooth 981. And we're streaming live on YouTube as well. Just search for Smooth 981. Good morning, Rotus. How's it going?
Hey, good morning. Good morning, Zibby. Good morning to all our listeners and viewers out there. Good to be with you all again.
All right, so we're talking about the interest rates being hiked to 18% by the Monetary Policy Committee.
That is correct. The decision was made yesterday, and the benchmark rate has been raised by another 50 basis points. It was at 17.5. They've raised it to 18%. That is the rates at which basically is what banks will use as a floor, for lending to the rest of us. So they have raised that rates. They continue to raise the interest rate, and they're doing it because they're trying to fight inflation, which is at 21.9%. And they've been chasing inflation ever since. So yeah, that was the decision that was made yesterday.
Was this latest hike part of your forecast?
It was not. I thought they would hold the rates because I thought for February that inflation would decelerate because of the cash scarcity. The cash scarcity basically had an impact on demand pull inflation, and basically people weren't able to request as demand for as many goods and services as they would. So yeah, that's what I thought, but I was wrong. I thought they would hold the rate because we saw year-on-year rise, but month-on-month inflation, that did decelerate and slow down. I thought that would be enough, but no, I was wrong. So my forecast was they would hold the rates at 17.5, but they increased it.
Right. So what is the impact of this increase on the economy, though? Will it be felt?
Yeah, borrowing costs will go up. Banks will likely send messages to people that have loans and tell them that they are repricing their loans upwards. Most loans in Nigeria are floating rate loans, not fixed rate loans, which means that as conditions change, the rates on the loans will change. So the bank will write and say, Dear Zibby, we write to inform you that due to the change in market conditions, your loan is going from whatever percentage it was upwards. So that makes borrowing more expensive. I mean, the whole idea of raising rates is to constrict the economy to a level where you reduce demand and you try to bring inflation down, but it doesn't seem to be working, quite frankly, at least on the monetary side.
Wow. Well, let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number again, 0809 4440981. Now, year-on-year inflation did keep climbing in February, but month-on-month decelerated. And there was an expectation that the cash scarcity would have an impact on the demand for goods and services. And so does this month-on-month inflation reflect that?
It did reflect that. It did reflect the fact that the cash scarcity had an impact. And, again, I'm waiting to see what those first quarter GDP figures are going to be between the cash scarcity, fuel scarcity early in January, also the elections shutting down activity briefly over those 2 weekends, February 25th and March the 18th. I expect quite a slowdown. But yeah, as far as month-on-month inflation is concerned, we did see the cash scarcity have an impact.
All right, let's talk about this continued rise in food inflation. Now, we understand that the MPC had made some observations. Can you share with us what those observations are?
Yeah, the central bank governor, in his post-MPC press conference, made 3 observations about the fact that food inflation continues to rise. Those 3 observations were that, so he talked about the shocks to food supply in Nigeria. One, he mentioned the rising cost of transportation. Roads are the primary means by which food is, in fact, anything is transported in this country. 96% of it goes through by road. If you order something to be delivered, it's not going to come to you by train. It's going to come to you on a bike or in a car. 2, so that's 1, transportation costs continue to rise. Two, he talked about attacks and insecurity in food producing areas, banditry and all that kind of stuff that's affecting farmers in certain areas. And then three, he talked about legacy infrastructure issues. Those legacy infrastructure issues is basically power. The fact that perishable goods cannot be stored for a period of time because they have to be moved quickly because they lack of power. So those three continue to impact food inflation, and continue to keep food prices elevated. So that was the observation that was essentially made yesterday.
So what can we take away from these observations, though?
The takeaway is that those things, Zibby, are outside of the Monetary Policy Committee's purview. They can't do anything about transportation costs. They can't do anything about insecurity in food areas where food is produced. And they can't do anything about legacy infrastructure issues. They can't do anything about power. Those things are on the fiscal side. So you've got fiscal and monetary policy. Monetary policy is, price stability and all that stuff that's handled, the currency and all that stuff handled by the, Monetary Policy Committee, that's the central bank. The fiscal side, taxing, spending, and all that stuff is for the federal government to do. So the federal government is the one that has, so I don't know, it wasn't subliminal. It was pretty openly saying that, look, we're trying to fight inflation. Food inflation keeps rising. It's up to the other side, federal government, to do something about transportation costs, do something about insecurity that's affecting food production areas, and do something about legacy infrastructure challenges. That essentially was the takeaway.
All right, let's look at a few messages coming through. Benga says, are those instruments of the CBN effective at all? Is the economy not driven by the informal sector? And Frank says, the continued rate hike by the MPC makes absolutely no sense. I believe that's what he says. You can't be hiking with the mindset of fighting inflation, yet maintain an artificially low yield on government securities. The banks are at the receiving end of this because of the rising cost of funds amid limited investment outlets. I'm wondering why they have not approached the Supreme Court to put a stop to the continued rate hike. That's that's
a jab at the Supreme Court's intervention in the currency redesign. So those messages are well accepted from Benga and our other listeners.
Okay, let's move slightly. How much pressure is being placed or heaped on emerging markets from the likes of Jerome Powell in the US, Christine Lagarde in Europe, and Andrew Bailey in the UK?
Yeah, so those are the central bank governors of the US Central Bank, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of England. They've been raising rates. To some extent, you could say it could lead to capital flights, where if securities, if they make securities more attractive, money flows out of here and goes there. But I think that's already been happening for a while now, and I think there is some impact, but we're facing more domestic issues here in Nigeria from those guys.
All right. If you're a central bank, perhaps in Ghana, South Africa, Kenya, what do you see or what do you plan for the foreseeable future?
Zibby, the way I'm seeing things, monetary policy is it's limited. Your Ghana's inflation is like 53, is it 52%? I think South Africa's about 7. Not can't remember what Kenya's is, but they've all been facing pressures. And so they will just do what they can, which is to continue to move their monetary policy tools around. How effective it is, looking at their domestic issues. South Africa has its issue with ESCOM. Ghana has its own issues with its, runaway inflation and debt issues. So it's all domestic. They can continue to hike rates to try to fight inflation, but from what I'm seeing, the impact doesn't seem to be that much.
All right, Gilbert says, on legacy infrastructure, we need to study the once vibrant railway service in Nigeria from 1898 up until 1983 and ask ourselves how the system collapsed till date.
Good point.
All right.
Good point.
Mm. Rotus, can you share the economic forecast from the CBN and the federal government? What do you make of them?
Yeah, for this year, I think the federal government says we'll grow by 3.2%. The CBN is saying 3%. I think even the IMF is saying 3.2. I don't know about that because there's going to be a number of challenges. There are modest forecasts, but I think we might grow on that under 3%, so maybe 2.7, 2.6, 2.8, if that.
Mm. So let's talk about the average Nigerian on the streets and the SMEs. What do they do in this rising rate environment?
Well, I mean, things are going to be borrowing is more expensive, which will impact the ability to get. I mean, the borrowing has always been expensive in Nigeria. Rates have been ridiculously high. So be resilient. And on the investment side, I mean, we'll talk about that on personal finance this afternoon at 5:15. We have somebody joining us. So everybody that's listening, tune in at 5:15 p.m. this afternoon for personal finance. But you have to mix and match your portfolio to try to get the best returns, which would involve possibly looking at foreign investment options to complement your Nigeria investment options as well.
All right. Well, that is all the time that we have for Business Express this morning. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your messages. And of course, thanks to Rotus for being with us here as well. Do stay with us. There is a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast. To you, I enter